Hello again, Rutinchi here. Today I'm going to talk about the way that I like to do things with an art pipeline, like a workflow between a coder and an artist in UE4. So we're going to start out from the artist perspective. This would be, for instance, a level that they had been doing. Um, all, I have started off with the first person template. All I have done with the starter content, all I've done outside of that is I created this folder. Well, first of all, you start out like this, and I showed the source panel because I find it much easier to work with, especially as you're going to see. And in the content, in the base, the root content folder, I created another folder called Assets for Game. And that's where we as the artist are going to store every single thing that we want in the game. Everything. All props, all textures, every level, everything inside of those levels needs to be in this folder. So, but to start out with, I've just created the folder and made a copy of the first person starter map into it. And then I have added a couple of the pieces of starter content, just so, so as you would do as an artist, adding props to a level. So, if we, as the artist, tried to just send this folder, just this assets for games, for game folder right now, none of these props would show up because we wouldn't be sending any of the mesh data, any of the material data, or any of the textures. So what we need to do, and just for the sake of brevity, I'm gonna assume that all of everything is inside of this starter content, and I'm gonna just move that directly into our assets for game folder. And what that's going to do when you move it is it looks through the entire project and looks for every reference of any of those files. And it not only moves them, but it also updates any reference to those files. So that means that all of our references to those files inside of this level are now going to be updated to their new location inside of the Assets for Game folder. Now, this is me adding the entire starter content folder is a bit heavy-handed, since I definitely haven't used everything inside of that folder. In an actual game, in an actual workflow setup, you're going to want to be a little more selective than that. You're only going to want to put the meshes, the materials, and the textures and particles and that sort of thing that you're actually using into that folder. But for the sake of brevity and for the sake of example, I'm simply moving everything just to get everything there as quickly as possible without having to, pick through here for the different... Alright, so you notice when you move it, it doesn't actually delete this folder because it's concerned that there was something in here, like these levels, that it couldn't quite copy just right. So if you want to look through here and make sure that you're not missing anything important, which it doesn't look like we are, then you can delete that. We're not going to use those levels, so it doesn't really matter. Now, whenever you delete anything, it will generally bring up this dialog box that shows you that it's calculating, this one. It's figuring out all references to any of this content to make sure that when you, basically it's safe to delete it, and if it's not safe, it gives you options for how to safely delete it or just force it. So as soon as this finishes, we're just going to force delete it because we don't need any of that. It's just folders and a couple of example levels. Yep. All right, so I'm not entirely positive. Oh, I bet one of those example levels is referencing that. So we're just going to force delete. And if... so I will say that you want to make sure that any assets that you do copy into this folder, you if it's going to be in a public space, like publicly facing in a public repository on GitHub, say, you want to make good and sure that you don't put any assets that somebody else owns. Now, the starter content, Unreal Epic probably isn't going to care, but you need to be really careful not to put anything that you got for instance, the marketplace in there. And if you just absolutely have to get stuff from the marketplace into there, say, you're using it in your game and you need to get it to your coder, be sure to make sure that it is a private repository that is not publicly accessible. Now, where you host is up to you. We use a private GitLab instance, but wherever you are storing it, whether it's on GitHub or your own GitLab or Bitbucket, make sure that it's a private repository. It's extremely important if you're going to have assets that somebody else owns. Now, obviously, if you're just putting your own stuff up there and you don't care if other people see it, or if you're open sourcing it, then more power to you. You store it however you want to store it, in whatever way you want to store it. But, all right, so theoretically, everything we need should now be in this folder. So, through the magic of editing, we're going to zoom over. Well, okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to, we should be all saved up. I'm going to close this. It's telling me that there's stuff that's unsaved. I'm going to tell it to save it. I'm going to, this is the content folder of that project. And I'm going to back out into the actual game. And normally what I would do is I would, inside of this assets for game, which has all of our stuff in it, I would create a Git repository. I'm using the command line. You could just as easily use Git Kraken or whatever. And so I'll add everything here. It's going to take entirely too long. And then commit it, push it up to your repository, and then on the other side, the coder would, inside of the actual game, now their entire folder would likely be a repository, but what they would do is inside of your inside of their content folder, they would create a submodule that points to your repository, and that way Git handles all of that, I guess you'd say mirroring back and forth, and it makes it very elegant, and that way you're not double storing assets on your on a repository somewhere, and it's much more efficient. In this particular case, what we're going to do instead is I'm just going to make a link to it, and do that real quick. So bear with me, I have forgotten the okay, it's target to link. Okay. It's late. So, yeah, full path to our artist folder. Artist content assets. All right. And then we want it to be called the exact case and all, same thing. The folder to be exactly the same here. So, got it now. So, now we're gonna open UE4 back up. And this time we're going to go into the actual game instead. Pops up. So, we're going to go into the actual game. Let it load up. Okay, so, and you'll notice we've got our assets for game. If we go into there, we've got our level. It's loaded up. And look, it's exactly as it was in the artist game. Now, if we hadn't made sure that we had all of the materials and meshes and everything in here, none of this would be here. Or the pieces that we missed would be missing. So, you know, you'd have an untextured chair, table, whatever. Or you wouldn't have the sconce or whatever. So, and that's it. That's the pipeline. So I hope this was helpful. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them in the comments section below. And if you have any suggestions for future tutorials, please let me know. Or if you have any questions that you feel like might make good videos, the answers to them. So, thank you.